From Germany, the Juju Orchestra, a fusion and Latin and funk band uh, with this tune titled This Is Not a Tango. It's from their 2007 album, Bossa Nova is Not a Crime. In some cases it could be, but this happens to be so enjoyable. This is Leid Stories. I'm Utrice Leid, and it is Free Your Mind Friday. A lot is happening that you should have an opinion about. A lot has happened since just yesterday, but we'll hear what's on your mind shortly. 888-874-4888 is the number to call to express your views about what is happening. And it would be good if you can include, when you cite problems or identify issues that are pressing, if you have some idea about what possible solutions might be. All right? 888-874-4888. Harvey from Berkeley, you're starting us off today.
Hello, wonderful Utrice.
Hey, Harvey, what's going on?
Well, Pacific Gas and Electric here in California has a nuclear power plant called the Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant, and it sits on a seismically active Pacific Ring of Fire earthquake and tsunami zone. And there's something that we can all do, especially Californians, to help protect California from the very real possibility of a catastrophic Fukushima-like nuclear meltdown. Because on July 28th, 2016, the Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant's vulnerability came to light during a California State Lands Commission meeting in Sacramento. At the meeting, PG&E announced that it would not seek to renew its operating license until 2045 and agreed to close the plant in 2025 if it was allowed to avoid the proposed Environmental Assessment Act known as CEQA, which identifies environmental impacts and problems. And PG&E knew that their aging and brittle Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant would fail to get a clean bill of health if the CEQA review was allowed to proceed. So instead of doing the right thing, the three California State Land Commissioners made a, metaphorically speaking, a deal with the devil, which authorized the nuclear facility to keep operating until 2025. And in doing so, the commissioners put us and our state in harm's way. It turns out that PG&E is shutting down its Unit 1 reactor for refueling between February 3rd and March 7th on 2019. And it would be a good time to test the reactor for any problems like brittleness, cracks, as well as investigating the mishandling of radioactive waste. So it's important for us, as well as many Californians as possible, to call or email Governor Newsom at his website, or the California legislators, as well as contact the California Public Utilities Commission and tell them to tell PG&E that it's a good time to do the necessary inspections, make public findings, hold hearings, and render the final decision as to whether Unit 1 reactor will reopen. And this is important to all of America because much of the food that goes across the table of America comes from California's Central Growing Valley. And it turns out that because oceanic winds blow inland, it turns out that the nuclear power plant sits on the coast, right in front of California's Central Growing Valley, and if we had a Fukushima-like meltdown, radioactive material will blow inland into the California Central Growing Valley and radiate most of the food there, as well as the water that comes off the Sierras and goes into cities like San Francisco and L.A. So you'd see a massive climate refugee situation coming out of California, and it would really ruin America. So this aging Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant, it's between February 3rd and March 7th of this year, they're going to close one of the reactors, and it really is a great time for them to test the plant to see how vulnerable it is to a Fukushima-like meltdown. So I'm calling on your wonderful audience and California specifically to get in touch with California's Governor Newsom through. You can go to Google and go to his website, or the legislators in California, as well as the California Public Utilities Commission, and tell them it's a good time to test the plant because it's vulnerable. Because just the fact that it didn't want to go through a CEQA review means that it's totally vulnerable to a Fukushima-like meltdown.
So, what are your thoughts about the fact the recent ruling that those horrendous fires were actually started by faulty equipment from private homeowners?
Yes. Well, the thing is that I don't know. It's hard to say whether they're right or wrong, but many, many other fires have been started by PG&E's shoddy transmission lines. And this isn't the first time. I mean, even the ones reported, there was fires way before that in the Sierras that burnt I don't know how many homes and killed people. Plus their natural gas pipelines. There was an explosion in San Bruno, California, that killed people and blew up homes. This is nothing new with PG&E, and they do this deferred maintenance thing, especially at the nuclear power plant. Now that they know that it's not going to, that it's only going to run till 2025, they're doing a deferred maintenance, which means they're not keeping up with the repairs. They're saving money, and because they're in a state of possible bankruptcy, I mean, who's looking, who's watching all these things to make sure that they're safe? So that's why it's so important for the government for us to step in and let Governor Newsom and the California Public Utilities Commission
you're not
know.
answering my question, though. This fire was determined to have started by generators and other equipment that was basically shielded from inspection by private citizens who said they wanted to set up their own alternative system of energy. And that took several hundreds of lives, tens of thousands of acres of land, thousands of properties destroyed. What is the solution here? Because you have on the one hand, a public utility with a spotty record, which is true. But on the other hand, you have citizens doing their own thing. Yeah. And at least according to the findings, that's where this conflagration that's kept spreading and spreading and spreading and causing all this damage and death and destruction, that's where it happened.
Yes, they said that the inspectors claimed that one of the fires, and it's only one of the fires, I think it's the Tubbs fire, was started by some private, like some home or something that started fire, and it wasn't the lines. But the answer to your question, as far as I'm concerned, is renewable energy microgrids. In other words, because we, Californians, and the California Public Utilities Commission cannot rely on the grid, the electric grid as it is, because then this next summer is coming up and there might be way more fires because of climate change is drying out all the forests, so even a spark from any of these transmission lines during high winds can trigger fire. So the answer is renewable energy microgrids, where areas are responsible for their own power and generated by solar power, by wind power, by wave power, by geothermal. And I
understand your point.
Yes.
But I need an answer to this question. When you have, what is the middle ground here between a public utility that is in the business of supplying energy, and I take the point about alternative systems that should work, and we have individuals such as what was discovered. These people were running their own thing unsafely, and look at the damage that they caused. What is their responsibility? What is their accountability what is the community of off-the-grid people to, come up with some kind of solution. You cannot have people going on their own and doing their own thing because, they're off the grid and they're finding alternative ways to supply their own energy. Look at the cost. So what is the instruction that we get from this particular event, horrific as it is? But I don't hear any solutions about, or even critique about what independent energy suppliers, the risk to a very wide community when they take it upon themselves to rig up their own systems and evade any kind of monitoring.
I completely agree with you. What should happen is that the government should oversee new policies away from the electric grid as it's known toward making sure, scrutinizing every other situation and making sure that things are done right. That's the only thing left we can do because we have to keep these groups in check as well as rebuild the infrastructure so that it's safe especially during time of climate change and our excessive use of fossil fuels are drawing out our forests. That's the way for the Newsom government and the California Public Utilities Commission to go, especially, as you say, to make sure that any independent energy system is done safely and within the structure of the California Public Utilities Commission.
But what also should happen is the community itself has to police itself. It has to come up with some kind of working plan as to how you install your system, what regulations you have to abide by, and to make it safe for everybody. I mean, look at the massive destruction and death and all the horrific things that were caused with these fires. And we're only talking about one, the Tubbs fire. But the community itself has to show some, in fact, a lot of responsibility for policing itself and trying to come up with rules. Because you can't have people setting up their own independent grid system and people are supposed to say, well, okay, that's great. But nobody is in a position to say whether it is certified, whether it's safe, whether it passes inspection. These are the things now that have to be tended to in a very aggressive way. It is, I mean, they are, in fact, directly accountable for this horrific fire, Tubbs fire. They are directly accountable. They cannot escape responsibility for that.
No, you're absolutely.
They hooked up their own thing.
You're absolutely right, and but I feel that an even worse possibility is a Fukushima meltdown at the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant, which would irradiate all the Central Valley and all the foods that America consumes. So I feel once again to get in touch with the governor and with the California Public Utilities Commission and tell them you want to see an inspection of the plant during February 3rd to March 7th of this year to test the reactors for being brittle, cracks, and the mishandling of radioactive wastes.
Right. Paul DiRienzo has done a series titled America's Fukushima, talking about the Hansen plant in upstate New York, in Washington, that is in very poor shape, as are many of the nuclear plants, and not just the operating plants, but the storage of nuclear waste material. So thanks for doing this, but I urge you, because you seem to be influential in this area, people have to address this problem and not run and hide. They caused a great disaster to happen that took unnecessarily took lives, so many hundreds of lives, and destroyed properties, thousands of properties. And there has to be some kind of legal response here because technically they'll just say, hey, well, we can't pay. We can't pay this kind of money in damages and just walk away. No, they have got to deal with what the problem that they caused. This is a problem also for the community of people going, off grid in whatever way they choose to do so. They've got to have some kind of uniform way of getting that done. Thanks so much for getting us started today, Harvey.
Thank you.
Daryl from New York, you're on the air.
Hello, Latrice.
Hi.
I wish I was. I'm in New York. 50 today, 30 tomorrow, 20 the next day, and Gary's predicting minus 90. Actually, what I wanted to talk to you about was one of your favorite topics, civics. I find it really interesting that, 290 votes in the Senate, 290 votes in the House of Representatives, and 90 votes, come on, gang. Let me try it again, Latrice. 290 votes in the House of Representatives and 67 votes in the Senate gets these people paid. Now, my understanding is that in December, when President Trump had pledged to sign the bill, there was a voice vote on a bill that I'm unable to find in the bill number for the Senate bill that was passed around December 18th by voice vote. To my mind, that means that's 100%, correct?
Well, I don't know because I'm not sure that we have correct information about how that went because, it was kind of like behind closed doors and out of the purview of media people who could have monitored it. So we don't know.
Well, that one,
sure.
I'm unable to find the number of the Senate bill, so I ask anybody who has any information that can teach me how to use Congress.org to get the bill number itself, because that's what's both reported in the newspapers and it seems to be in the congressional record for December 18th, but I'm unsure. Then the first day of the session, there was a bill passed by Congress, by the House of Representatives, and then sent to the Senate, and Mitch McConnell refused to bring it to the floor. Do you remember that?
Yes, but so I'm waiting for your point.
My point is that you don't need Donald Trump. This has nothing to do with the wall. It has to do with Congress providing 290 votes in the House of Representatives and 67 votes in the Senate to provide a bill to pay the people who are now, it's getting pretty dangerous out there, and people aren't being fed, and airplanes may be dropping out of the sky any minute now, according to today's reports. That's civics, right? You override the veto?
Well, here's the thing.
Yes.
We are being directed to things that really do not matter in the scheme of things. I know it sounds like it sounds crazy to say it.
No, it's absolutely factual. Slavery is slavery.
We should have our eyes fixed on what the issue is. The issue isn't whether they could come up with the votes to essentially reopen government and let the money flow to the people whose paychecks were taken from them. So it seems to me that the focal point should be under what authority. That's what they ought to be voting on. Did the president act within his authority to do that?
To do what?
To summarily just stop the pay for 800,000 people. That's the issue.
Constitutionally, he has the right to veto any law that he doesn't approve of.
He's not the only person to veto a law. And it seems to me that the issue is that especially the Senate, which is Republican controlled, is trying to do all kinds of calisthenics to protect the insane and illegal and unconstitutional decisions and actions of the president. That's the issue.
On other things other than this particular thing, and definitely what you're saying about the Senate is true. That's why I'm saying that what is not being talked about is why, if you took the bill that let's just say that the bill was passed on a voice vote in December and sent to the House, and Paul Ryan didn't bring it up, and then Nancy Pelosi took the same bill and passed it in the House of Representatives with more than 290 votes and sent it to the Senate. Then the question would be, and this is what I'm attempting to verify, I've called news agencies, I've called the Congress people, everybody wants to talk about walls and stuff. I don't want to do that. I want to talk about the Constitution and overriding a veto, all right? He has a right to veto any law that comes in front of him. That's why you have the override. If the bill that was sent from Nancy Pelosi's House of Representatives to the Senate was the same bill that the Senate passed by voice vote, then all that was required was for Mitch McConnell to put the bill on the floor. However, because people who are doing the reporting aren't telling the American public that this is simply a matter of overriding a veto. It has nothing to do with walls. There's no two sides. There's no you need to make an offer. How can you vote against a bill that you just a month ago you voted for on a voice vote?
Okay, I understand your point, and you have a very strong point. But I'm saying, even so, it is a distraction. They both indulging in distraction.
Yes, I agree with you, and I don't understand what the Democrats think they're going to get out of dealing with this distraction. They mention it sort of in passing, and Charles Schumer, who I will never vote for, ever, I don't understand what his strategy is here. While they're doing that, judges are being put on the court every single day at the rate of, I don't know, maybe 25 a week or something like that. That will make it impossible for most people to get any kind of justice in the lower courts. So
the truth of it, and again, you're right in the correct neighborhood on this one. The truth is the Democrats have no plan. And they haven't had a plan for a long time, which left wide open the possibility and the reality of Trump doing whatever the hell he wants to do. They have no plan.
I agree with you.
However, you can't invent a plan post facto. And you can't tell me that people as experienced as Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi are so naive as to believe that they should not have a working plan to counter what they know the president is likely to do, but they have no plan. So they've been caught flat-footed, and now they have to figure out how to react to Trump's insanity and his crazy plan. The basic issue here is not even the plan. The basic issue is, how did the Democrats and even Republicans, nobody escapes accountability here, how is it possible that they are talking about issues that really aren't important right now? What is important is dealing swiftly and with some degree of authority about a renegade president, a rogue president, doing things that are just it almost amounts to treason. How are you going to get up in the morning and just announce, well, 800,000 people, uh, you're not going to get a check for a while. And now, even his commerce secretary and the president himself articulating the same sentiment. You should go out there and ask your neighbors to help you with food. You should go out there and apply for a loan.
Yeah.
After summarily cutting a budget. That budgetary move required legislative action. Not the president can't wake up one morning and say, okay, what's next? We see where he's going in Venezuela.
Yep.
He's decided we need a nice little war in Venezuela. So let's have one.
People who will execute it with Brazil and Colombia. They don't even have to put boots on the ground. They may not even have to send in jets. The point is the population is listening to a news media that is telling them. I just watched Adam Schiff on Amanpour say, well, the president is shaky, but I agree with him on this dictator Maduro. Come on. If you strangle a country's economy, how would you have an embargo? You won't send them back the money that they earn legally in this country. When in fact they subsidize your citizens with gas with heating oil in the winter with their program from Citgo. I mean, the population has no clue because they're working all the time. Capitalism is capitalism. You got people going to work and apologizing because they can't go into their savings or their pockets to get to work, and they're not being paid. To me, that's slavery. So my answer is...
They're not being paid by the unilateral decision of a president.
Yes,
that's the problem.
All he did was deny an appropriation, which he has every right to do. That's why it's not on him. He's acting constitutionally. It's the other two branches, other branch of government, the Congress, the House and the Senate, that don't override his insanity. I can understand why the Republicans don't want to do it, but I don't understand why the Democrats don't take the bill that was passed at 100%.
They can't. You don't understand. The Democratic Party is fractured. The Democratic Party is still trying to climb out of its own chaos. Nobody knows who's in charge of anything. All they've been doing is exactly what Trump is doing, securing their own butts.
Right. This is what this is. That's exactly what it is. Everybody's looking out for their job. Everybody's looking out for their job, and they don't care what the people. And so the people, because they're failing to get from the media the information that they need. Why is it they went in and sat in the Senate, right? And the president of the American Federation of Government Employees mentioned the override, but he didn't emphasize it. People don't hear. They don't understand. They'll set up a soup kitchen for you rather than going to their elected official and saying, you lose your job unless these people go back to work. They're looking at socialist ways to cure a problem and denouncing socialists for having that thought.
Let's be real clear. The Democratic Party has been in a shambles for quite a while. It can't suddenly come together. It would be a false notion that suddenly we could come together and take care of business. They haven't been taking care of business for a long time, which gave Trump ample opportunity to do whatever the hell he wants to do.
And that's what he's doing.
That's exactly what he's doing.
And so what I'm saying is, let's not mention his name anymore and focus on the people who seem not to have a clue. Let everybody call Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, explain to them that an override with with a bill that was passed by voice vote in December, around December 18th. Unfortunately, I don't have the number because I'm unable to figure out how to use the congress.org. And if you know anybody who can use that thing, please let me know or announce it. We need tools in order to get information so that we can share information. And in this case, if you had the two bill numbers and the House vote was 290 votes, then it would be easier. If it wasn't, then we need to focus on the people who didn't vote for the House resolution, bring it up to 290, then bring it up to Mitch McConnell, demand he put it on the floor, or else he doesn't get to go anywhere. He stays in his office. Mass arrest.
He does get to go somewhere. You know why? Because this very moment, he has organized his life.
Yes.
They're all safe. They're all financially safe. Over the years, they have put in place with the people's money and through these make-believe
security
projects.
Money, by the way.
So they have they have cushioned themselves against any possibility. If they should get fired tomorrow, if they should die, if they should lose their seats, for all these possibilities, they're well protected. So they do not fear the people. The people can't do anything to them. Not at this stage.
Only because the people aren't properly informed and prepared to take action. I mean, there was a call by the national flight attendants for a general strike, but that went by about a half second, 3 seconds or so. Once again, that's not even necessary at this point. I mean, if you want these people paid...
It's a very simple thing, all right? I'm speaking now with an organizer's mentality.
Yes.
You don't need to get all complicated about the situation.
Right.
The president has imperiled the lives of 800,000 people just because he felt like it.
Right.
And he felt he could do it, and he was allowed to do it. That's all we need.
Yes.
That's the only information we need.
All right. What action then do we take?
You hit the streets, and you make this country ungovernable.
Exactly. Now we're on the right page.
America great again. This is how he chooses to make America great again, by hurting Americans and doing it this way, and then insisting that he has the right to do it. And his silly administration, they're all going along with this, which in my view is totally unconstitutional.
But it's not. He can veto that. He can refuse to sign that bill if he wants. However,
I'm not talking about a
with
veto. I'm talking about the initial decision.
Which initial
You
decision?
do not wake up as a president. You're not a dictator yet of the United States. You do not decide by yourself, absent any kind of discussion, any kind of hearing as to the likely impact. You're not drawing anybody into this discussion because there is no legitimacy to his argument. And then he proceeds on his own and makes it de facto law. This is what I'm talking about.
Okay, wait a minute.
This is the very thing I'm talking about.
Let me understand what you're saying. He told Mitch McConnell before Ann Coulter and Rush Limbaugh called him out that he would sign the short-term appropriations bill. Mitch McConnell...
I'm talking about the appropriations bill. The
what are you talking
appropriations
about?
bill comes after an unconstitutional and unprecedented act by a president of the United States.
That's not true.
Well, that's where we should.
It happened.
That's where we should focus. What is
the penalty? What happened. How can you focus on something that didn't happen? This was about an appropriations bill. All he did was refuse to sign a bill.
Don't
He
say it
didn't
didn't
do
happen.
anything other than
Because he made the statement, and within a matter of a couple of days, it was in effect, as if it were law. It
okay,
isn't law.
but exactly the point. The reason they're not getting paid is because there is no money in their agencies to pay them. The reason
No,
there's no money
that's
in their agencies to
no, no,
pay
no, no,
them.
no, 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 no.
Yes, 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 yes.
It is not about the reason they're not getting paid. I don't care about the reason they're not getting paid. I am stuck with the idea that they're not getting paid.
All right,
Trump's
so, wait a
children
minute.
are getting paid. Trump's
Patrice,
salary is still
Patrice,
flowing.
are you
Mike
going
Pence
back
is
to
getting
when he
paid.
had the meeting with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and he said, I'd be glad to shut down the government? Is that what you're saying?
No, my point is again,
Yes.
we are being coaxed into mistaking distraction as the issue. The issue is very clear, very simple. The issue is you have a president, a rogue president acting like a damn dictator, who took it on himself to enact legislation, if you will.
No, he did not enact any legislation. All
Listen to
he
what I'm
did was
saying. Listen to
fail
what
to
I'm saying.
sign an appropriations bill denying funds
When he
to
did
the
it,
agencies,
when
denying
he did what he did, which is to take it upon himself. This did not come before Congress. This wasn't discussed.
Whoa.
in
What didn't come
legislative-
before Congress?
I'm
The
sorry?
shutdown?
Not the shutdown. The shutdown was discussed after the fact.
Okay, wait a minute. I'm trying to get to what?
You're not getting my point.
No, I'm
My
not.
point is the president he's done these things before, and he's about to do it again in Venezuela. He has, for all intents and purposes, the United States has already been part of a coup.
Yes, that's definite. It started many years ago.
They're talking about it after the fact.
They already have the Lima Group in place to invade.
Exactly.
Who is the Lima Group?
And this president decided
right?
that he had the power unilaterally to break the law, because there is a law in the United States. You cannot be forced to work for no money. And yet, here's the discriminatory part of it. He is depriving 800,000 people of a paycheck.
No.
His daughter is still getting a paycheck. His son is
analysis, Patrice. The Congress is depriving them of the paycheck.
No.
They could override his veto and fund those agencies. They can do that.
I'm disagreeing with you, but
you
it is a
disagree, but the Constitution says they can do it.
Way. The problem is
that they won't do it.
We have a renegade president doing.
As long as you stay with the crazy man in the White House, you won't get you won't get the people to move. They will continue to set up soup kitchens and food banks.
When things get hard enough, maybe the things aren't hard enough.
Can you get in slavery and asking your fellow people for money that they don't have because they're in the 50% that doesn't have any money? Well, I mean, this country is mesmerized by its ignorance. That's
we will see if people are inclined to operate with their common sense. We need no further instruction.
We see what's happening.
We see who's responsible, and we're waiting for a solution to magically appear. It's not going to happen that way. So maybe this is the way we need to go to learn a lesson. We have a rogue president. We have a president of unsound mind. I've been saying that since day one.
I agree.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is the way that you deal with someone who is rogue and crazy is, to the best of your ability, if you have it, to ignore him and find better ways to do it. And in this instance, since you do have a Congress that can provide the funds, why not focus on people who say they want to do something rather than someone who says they don't want to do something?
Let me ask you sincerely.
Yes.
As opposed
Patrice,
to
we worked together for a long time when you was in New York. I was one of the chief anti-apartheid folks with Joe Horn and Donna.
Yes.
Anyway,
but let me ask you,
yes.
as you look at the situation,
yes.
do you, given what people have put up with so far, out of fear,
I'm
more than
terrified
anything
myself.
else,
Thank you.
do you think that miraculously they will move away from that model and become super activists? It's not going to happen.
No, that's not what I'm not even asking for that. I'm asking them to, rather than focusing on making sure that the food banks are fully stocked and having clothing drives and all of that, go in, spend just a little time. You don't have to spend more than a couple of hours in your congressperson's office and your senator's office every day until they allow a vote which would override the president's veto, so that, and then have it broadcast. I'm talking about really, like you're broadcasting this nonsense about Maduro and the number of people who are leaving the country because the oligarchs are holding on to all the goods and services and preventing business from happening. Who's starving? Focus on getting the people paid. Once they get paid, then they'll understand a little bit that they have a little power here. Maybe they can do a little bit more. Maybe they can do a little bit more. It's like when you want to organize in a community, you start with the stop sign. Then you move on to the stoplight. And then you actually move on to changing the representatives.
I admire your optimism. I'm not.
No, ain't no optimism. This is straight up get these people paid. If you have another way to get it done, I'm listening. This is concrete. 67 votes.
What I'm trying to say to you is they have zero incentive. They have no real intention of moving vigorously and aggressively in the interests of the people. They don't. They don't have the guts.
And we have any way of getting the major media to then put that out regularly rather than this nonsense about the wall?
Well,
I have yet to hear anybody in the media repeat override. I have yet to hear we need to put an offer on the table.
People understand what overrides entail.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I started the conversation with your favorite thing, civics, right? Implicitly you teach the Constitution and civics when I listen to you on these kinds of matters. And if they understood what power they have, then perhaps they'd be willing to exercise it. And the power that we have is to get our representatives to make sure these people get paid, or to shut down the airports and the ports and everything else so that nothing moves. That's a little bit hard.
When I talk about failure of leadership, it's not just in Congress.
You're right. I agree with you.
The unions are
burning a hole in my brain.
Pitiful in what they have done or not done in representing their memberships. You tell me, as I said, 800,000 people is more than the population of many small countries.
And they're looking for handouts because they don't know what their power is.
It's as if we don't mean business.
Vitamin C and zinc.
It's as if we don't mean business, and everybody understands that. And you have several things that are running concurrently, which have been neglected. You have a fractured Democratic Party. There's no real opposition here. The progressives have nothing to say.
I
Not even
don't
the
think they're getting any
radicals have
time.
anything to say.
I don't think they're getting any airtime.
So
I'm
we will
serious.
wait and see.
Have you watched any of the reporting on Venezuela? How could you
Well,
interview the
that's why I
president of
did the
Colombia when
program.
talking
I've
about
been doing the
Venezuela?
programs on Venezuela. I'm not waiting for the major media to recognize the story.
Yeah, well, I was just commenting on, you said that the progressives aren't doing anything. Bernie Sanders came out in favor of invasion. I mean,
And
come
Bernie
on, man, give me a
Sanders
break.
himself is being attacked by the Democrats.
Oh, even the less offensive are offensive.
You see what I mean? Is you can't have it. You can't try and fool people, because this now becomes a massive propaganda issue where you have to persuade people that what they are seeing, they're not seeing.
Actual.
You can't tell me, even if you don't describe yourself as a patriot, it can't possibly sit well with you as an American that this is what an American president is doing to 800,000 Americans. And it doesn't get you all riled up. No. You can't then talk to me about patriotism and America, because it is a kind of cannibalism, and we are allowing it. That's my problem. We're allowing this very unstable guy to have his way, and his whole administration is behaving like a bunch of thugs. As long as they have access to the money and they could make out really like fat cats, even before there's a change of administration, they're going for broke. They're setting up themselves and their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren to be wealthy. The same guy, Secretary of Commerce, who is advising people without a paycheck to go beg for food from their neighbors and to go see about taking out a loan. He has more than $2 billion in net worth. So he's not worried about how things go. It's an academic exercise to him. But we have to stand up. And I'm waiting to see when we will have the guts to do so. Thanks so much for your call today. Thank you, Daryl, for calling in. Eric from Delaware, you're on the air.
How you, Patrice? Happy Friday. Very interesting debate going on there with the previous caller. You said something interesting when you pointed out that people are not seeing what they're really seeing. I have a slightly different perspective. The president and the Congress going through all these different arguments and debates about shutdown, budgets, and bills that are coming forward and so forth. It was in 2001 when Grover Norquist made it very clear that the Republican agenda was to make the federal government small enough to drown in the bathtub. And I propose that what we're looking at is a test to see how much of the federal government can actually operate with fewer people and fewer cost until the people make enough noise and enough fuss to force an action. And with the things like artificial intelligence coming, things like automation, all of these things which will remove the people, the government worker, from the activity of the actions of the federal government. So let me give you an example. Right now, Airbus and Boeing have airplanes that can take off, fly and land without a pilot. There is software that is available to manage air traffic control. You put those two systems together, you don't need the pilots and you don't need the air traffic controllers anymore. Now, if that is an example of how technology is going to allow the federal government to operate without a payroll, that just becomes a capital investment, which is going to last for some period of time, and operations go on just fine, and the airlines still make their money because they're flying passengers from here to there without the burden of the FAA. And so the question then becomes, if that is the strategy of the Republicans and the Democrats, and I think to your point with the previous caller about the Democrats being paralyzed, it's more than just paralysis. They're in on it. And I say that because every time Charles Ortel comes on your program, he points out to us very clearly how the Democrats are in on it. And so we're looking at a national experiment in social chaos.
I don't know that I agree with that, because it has always been the case. Now, even with advanced technology, you see, here again, there are unions, and they should be anticipating these changes that they think are likely to happen. They should be doing the job that unions are supposed to be doing in organizing and protecting the interests of their workers. They're not doing that very well. If right now you can tell me as a regular citizen, if you have the ability and the foresight and the intelligence to put these things together, and you can, with that information, see where things are going, what excuse do they have in the industry that they can't see, and therefore begin the process of preparing for what will be a dramatic shift in the way of work, and therefore in the value
Patrice,
of
you're
work.
making the point. The point is made when you take a look at people's reactions. People are thinking right now about how they're going to survive the next 30 days when the mortgage gets dropped off in the mailbox. It's simple that it's short-term thinking and short-term reaction that we're looking at, which fails to recognize the patience that capital investment has. Since Ronald Reagan started cutting taxes and doing all the things that he was doing, think about that. That was in 1980. And we're just beginning to see those things that Reagan was doing starting to blossom for capital now. And that, I think, is what we as poor people and we as progressive people fail to do, is to recognize the long-term nature of these strategies which are in place. We simply can't see that far.
Well, I have a different theory, although I don't deny your point. You have a very strong point, and it's hard to argue against it, but still I'll try. The point I'm making is that even with our troubles, we still psychologically are oriented toward thinking that we wouldn't have to really see hard times, that there's always going to be a solution. And it wouldn't necessarily require a whole lot of us, out of us, I should say. It somehow will come, it will develop. And usually at a point when it's beyond the tipping point, it is the actual thing happening. That's the pattern. People are not likely to prepare themselves. They're not paying attention to trends. They're not seeing what the immediate future looks like, because they're so consumed, literally, from living from day to day. That's the reality. So I think I'll build on your theory, and we should have discussions about it. What is it that we're not getting? And why aren't we more excited and involved in our own interests than we are today? That's a big nut to crack right there. But it has to be discussed. We are spoiled. Thank you so much for joining me today and for offering your thoughts. So many more people to talk to, but we'll accommodate everybody when all is said and done. Have yourselves a great weekend. Surround yourselves with people who add dimension to your life. Keep a sense of humor, and we'll see each other on Monday. Bye-bye.